6. The libido theory. To return again to Freud's concept of the personality, let us consider briefly one of its most controversial aspects, the libido theory. The analysis of character formation and the establishment of repressions and character in childhood is not too far from long-established theories, but to describe man's instinctual energy as essentially sexual aroused a tremendous storm. Freud defined libido as, quote, a term used in a theory of the instincts for describing the dynamic manifestation of sexuality, end quote. The libido is ego energy, for the ego is its, quote, first dwelling place, end quote, which it energizes and makes its permanent headquarters. The libido is the life instincts expressed, but death instincts also are present in man. For the present, however, let us consider the libido. Its sexual orientation has been the basis of a savage and protracted attack on Freud. It has also brought to his defense every kind of libertine force imaginable. Is there a justification for Freud's position? It is immediately apparent that sexuality has often had a religious centrality in man's history, as Baal worship and all fertility cults clearly indicate. Moreover, very often in times of crisis, men have turned to sexuality as a religious synonym for life, and the proximity of death has intensified sexuality. At the end of the Middle Ages, the plague in Europe brought not only death, but also a fanatical plunge into sexuality. More recently, when the 1906 earthquake brought ruin to San Francisco and a severe shaking to Oakland, terrified men, quote, lined up for blocks, end quote, in Oakland in front of houses of prostitution, quote, all day long and at night, end quote, seeking, in the face of the nearness of death, to affirm life by means of sexuality. This evidence is real, but far from conclusive. In each instance, what was involved is either a decadent and degenerate culture or a degenerate stratum of society. Freud's thesis here has been undercut by biological studies which indicate that sexuality is predominant among caged zoo animals who live in a maximum security welfare economy, whereas among wild animals the primary concern of the male is dominion, or hierarchy, and territoriality, or property. Freud's biology was thus based on zoo animals, and his anthropology on decadent socialistic men, on welfare cultures rather than a free society. At this point, Freud's thesis is hurt but not destroyed. His attempt to read guilt in biological terms can survive this crippling of theory. For Freud, quote, the forces of the neuroses originate in the sexual life, end quote, and sexual life is burdened by guilt, coming in part from the superego and the early, repressive training of the child, and from the id, where ancient taboos are equally strong impulses as are biological energies. As a result, man is torn between a desire to violate the taboo and a desire to obey the taboo, the result being a continual ambivalence, a, quote, wish and counter-wish, end quote. This conflict leads to the repression of the libido, which repression produces anxiety. Freud's concepts of neuroses and anxiety are thus clearly related to his biological interpretation of guilt.